this morning, and it's Thursday, in case you needed the reminder too. We hope that you're well. I know it's a little rainy outside, which can make it challenging. We really, I know, enjoy our outdoor time right now. But since we're indoors, it's a great opportunity for us to be chatting. And this morning, we're so happy to have Amy Edelstein with us. Amy has been part of our healingSPACE team for some time now. She also has a private practice, and she is a wonderful clinical supervisor and has been, really instrumental in helping develop our violence program as she's been with us. Prior to being with us, she was with the Renfrew Center of New York, and she also was with Safe Horizon. So we decided to chat with Amy today because I know as a mom myself and through a lot of the parents that we have at the YWCA that are in our programs and conversations we've had, that, a lot of questions have come up about children and their anxiety and the questions and their mental health at this time. Obviously, the way that we're living is challenging, and the information that might be on in the house is stuff that children are hearing. And, this is a great opportunity to talk with Amy this morning so we can keep a pulse on our children's mental health a little bit and, talk a little bit about how our daily routines as they've changed and how we're a little more obviously isolated from personal contact with friends and family has created some stress and anxiety and how we can work through some of that. So with that, Amy, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
um, I know that not only are you a clinician, you're a mom, so I know that you can relate to this topic on both fronts.
I can, and it has been challenging for sure.
I second that. I second that. So we know that a lot of parents are, doing a juggling act right now. The ones, obviously many of them are homeschooling, and I'm homeschooling 7-year-olds. But I know that from what I talk to friends, it doesn't really matter what age you're homeschooling. Different challenges come with the different age groups for sure. Um, but we also know that that kind of isolation from friends and family has created some challenges for our children as well. So, can you talk to us a little bit about, as parents, ways that we can prioritize our children's mental health and emotional health during this time?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a day-to-day growing challenge that we need to do a lot of observation first to kind of feel out what are we seeing in our children, what are we noticing in ourselves. And I am a mom as well with 4-year-olds and a 1.5-year-old. So um the challenges are, they're different, but they're steady with any age group. So I think, talking to your child realistically and transparently in an age appropriate way is really critical. I think the most difficult part of this is that we don't have an end date. We don't, it's very uncertain, and so uncertainty really is what can create anxiety. So in us, so knowing that that's a point of anxiety in ourselves, we need to make sure we're prepared to talk to our children about it.
Right. Well, and that is so key, right? Because whatever we're experiencing does spill over onto our kids around us, whether or not we think we're hiding it well or masking it or whatever, that it is happening around us for sure. So what are some of the signs, that we could be seeing with our kids that might trigger for us that something's going on with them?
Right. I think that, children don't have the ability to articulate their feelings in the way that adults do. And so, they may not realize that the behaviors they're displaying are rooted in other feelings. So, not something that is just unique to children, adults do the same thing. So often anxiety is really at the root of what may look like frustration or irritability. And we see this, in all different ways with our kids. So it can show up with just looking like irritation, defiance, clinginess, regression. I think what I'm seeing in my kids, right, in a toddler or preschooler, they may start stop sleeping through the night or having sleep disturbances, having accidents, hitting, biting, want to be held more. In older children, it may look more like defiant behaviors or clinginess or crying. And so I think, knowing that as parents, knowing that these behaviors are absolutely normal when there's been such a change in everyday life, like with COVID-19, what we're experiencing now, I really like to talk about this time as a collective trauma. And so, you know, even if we're not explicit with our children about sort of the gravity of what's happening around us, they feel it from us in so many different ways. So I think what's so important is just creating predictability and consistency when we may feel like there's not a whole lot of that for ourselves, but feeling like we can create that for our children, because when it's disrupted, it's normal to exhibit these changes and behaviors.
So obviously we've been home for a few weeks now, and this was actually a conversation very early on I thought about having. But funny enough, I think if we had had it early on, and then we almost would have needed to have it again today because it's changing. What's happening in our houses are changing. Although, in some ways they may be, the same kind of reactions. But I think, as you said, the longer this goes on, the challenges come with it. What are some of the ways that you recommend explaining to our children what's going on? Because I think that, and I know in my house, although we try to limit the news being on, and then being an earshot of it, the reality is they're hearing conversations that might be happening in the house, whether they're hearing about, you know, hearing that we've heard somebody died, from COVID, that we heard somebody contracted it. And then if they hear that someone else contracted it and they heard that someone died, and that kind of making that connection on their part and that fear. There's just, and just if the news is on, there's such a bombardment of information that is a lot for us to process, let alone, for them to piece it together. So what are some conversations we could be having with them, to explain what's going on around us?
Well, and I think it depends on, your own level of comfort, right? As a parent, and what you feel like is appropriate for your child to know, what they can handle, what might really feed into their anxiety, and certainly age plays a part in that. So, talking about that a virus is something that people sick, it's like a cold. We're all staying home really so that less people will get sick. That is probably that's really what I'm telling my 4-year old. That's
Mhm.
as much as he can handle right now.
Right.
That ensuring that they will be okay, that we will be okay. And of course, with older kids, if someone in your family has actually been sick, right, talking about what that's like and giving them as much information as you feel like they really can understand, because transparency is so so important. We may want to shield our children from this because we feel like we're protecting them, but the avoidance, they can sense that, and avoidance creates anxiety. So, whatever age level you feel like your child is at, to really give them as much information in an age sensitive way.
So I think in my house, having, 7-year olds that only made it, a little over halfway through first grade, um, the conversation keeps coming up about, well, when are we going back to school? I mean, they're missing their teachers, they're missing their friends. And although, they're having this Zoom experience, it's not quite as fulfilling, as, hanging on the, around in the playground on the monkey bars and on the swings together. What are some conversations we can have about dealing with that feeling of loss, that they're really disconnected from something that, was very supportive and important to them.
Well, I think with any kind of, honest conversation with your kids, this is a big loss. This is a loss that we're all feeling in different ways. And for kids, right, they miss their friends, they miss that connection just like we do. And so I think bringing ourselves into the conversation is really important. Acknowledging that we're feeling that as well. And always ensuring that we will be okay, right? We will get to sort of whatever the next road is, we will get there together. We will get there in a way that we will support them, so that they're always feeling the confidence in their caregivers, because that's most important. And I think being really honest about, we're not sure what this is going to look like. It's going to be a new normal, and we're going to find out together. And every day the leaders of our country are giving us more information about how we're going to get to the next step. Um, but I think with dealing with loss or dealing with anxiety or any of the other feelings that are coming up, being attuned to your child is really important. And when I say attunement, I mean, being aware of their emotional experience and responding appropriately. So if they're acting out or they're frustrated, you know, yelling at them without knowing if it's really rooted in anger might not be the right way to go. And not to say that we're all human and we are managing our own feelings and our own
Mhm.
emotions. And I'll get to that later, how we can do that um, in the best way possible. But, it may be rooted around loss and uncertainty and anxiety. So being attuned to them, naming their feelings, talking to them about what they might be feeling or naming them if they're very young, and validating their emotional experiences is so important, because if we don't do that, we can't sort of get to the next step.
So you're describing, I guess, an activity that would, and maybe this is going there, what you just referenced. You're describing an activity that for, those of us as parents, we have to be somewhat, some keenness and awareness to be able to identify some of this in them, and also to manage our own triggers of, their reaction and how it's impacting us. And of course, knowing that we're all carrying our own level of stress and anxiety about this, I can personally share that, it's challenging when you're working full time in your house and you're trying to also homeschool. And if there's any other kind of care of another family member going on in your house, and also having to make lunch and, having to get on a Zoom call and getting something read and written simultaneously. So we're managing a lot for ourselves, and then to then flip to that next level of seeing that and supporting it in our child. That's a lot. That's a lot. What are some tips for parents to help them manage that piece?
Well, I think it's this. It is. It's a lot, and to say that I am not losing my patience many times a day would be definitely not true. So I think knowing that you're human and that we're all doing this together, and um, we're all trying to stay accountable and to stay predictable and to stay consistent and to be the best people that we can. I mean, something I say a lot is, you know, um, you do the best you can in every moment, and there's always a next moment.
Mm.
So you can, you may raise your voice and regret doing that, and there's always a next moment. So I think really getting attuned to your own emotional experience as what you're facing, right? You're talking about working full time, um, taking care of your children, homeschooling your kids, doing meals and snacks, feeding yourself, trying to,
Oh, that.
manage the activities, give yourself structure. Your partner maybe also doing the same thing, and so how are you working together? I mean, it's a very, very difficult time, and it's really unprecedented. So we don't have much to look back on to say like, oh, this was helpful in this kind of a crisis before. We're sort of creating this as new. So I think, recognizing your own limits and needs, getting your own support in the limited ways that we can. That's the best we can do. What are some really small things that we can do to take care of ourselves, because that's most important, so that we can take care of our children. And it's not easy, and I'm not going to come up with some brilliant idea that no one's ever thought of before, but it really is something that, you know, to make an intention to do that every single day, is important during a crisis like this.
So we had a question come in asking about teenagers a little bit, and obviously, you and I obviously have youngins, so we're chatting about that. But how how are these strategies different, or any thoughts for parents that are dealing with teenagers in COVID-19 time?
Well, I don't think it's so different. I think that, it really is about supporting your child wherever they're at, whatever age they're at. Your adult children may be home living with you now during this time too. And I think creating that connection, attuning to your child, even if they're an adult, right? They're still your child. Understanding what they're facing in their own struggle with this day to day. That's the best we can do as parents, is really creating that connection and encouraging the resiliency, in the family. And that might look like providing extra support in ways that we just didn't have to do before. So, spending more time talking, spending more time as a family doing really small things that maybe we just didn't have time to do in our, previous life.
Mhm.
Um, but I think, so regardless of the age of your child, the support's going to look different, but it's just as important.
And, just thinking about that age group, and especially we've got, so many young people that maybe were seniors in high school, and so they're missing their proms and missing um, uh, graduations, and going to just check out their colleges before they went there for their kickoff moment. And what are some thoughts for parents to help manage that and kind of their reaction to that? Because I have heard from a lot of parents that, the between the sadness and the anger, and the,
Mhm.
that's been a lot, that particular age group and with those particular types of losses have really been different, for parents to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I think about those things as ambiguous loss, right? They're not things that we had, but they're things that we expected. We expected our senior year to look like
Mhm.
this, for us to be finally enjoying our time and being free, and all these really really huge life events that are looking completely different. And so I think those losses that many of us are facing, you know, your child may need to talk to professional help as well. You may need to consult with professional help to really figure out how can you support your child in the best way. So again, I think it's about attuning to their feelings, their needs, their emotional experience, and knowing that some of these losses may really cause some more intensive behaviors and maybe depression and anxiety that really does need to be dealt with a professional person, which is absolutely okay. There are so many resources out there right now that are available to do things just like this through video. And it's different, but it's what we have. And as someone who's been doing telehealth now, since this crisis started, it really is very effective. I think I was personally surprised with just how connected I have felt with the people that I'm working with or treating. And I think, not to feel the stigma around that, because this is something that we're all going through as a community, and some of the losses that we're experiencing are greater than others and may just require more support.
So you raise a important point, and I'm hoping, people at home may not have realized this. I mean, even though we are, if you haven't been in any kind of therapy and have not received any kind of formal, clinical support up until now, but suddenly now you're feeling like you need it. Even in the midst of this crisis, you can still reach out, engage, and start a therapeutic relationship very focused on now.
Hmm.
And so, how does that look for someone doing that? Kind of, it's you as a provider. What happens on your end? It's just as easy as a phone call. How do they? And obviously, their insurance and those things if they have it and so forth. But how, just to kind of walk them through, because I know that that might have been something that they thought maybe they had to wait till this was all over, to get out and access that.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that, it may even be easier. I think because we're all home, everyone, doctors,
Right.
providers, medical professionals, therapists, we're all home. And so, reaching out however you might reach out, if we were back in sort of person, looking at insurance, who might be covered, looking at resources, certainly for sexual violence survivors, calling healingSPACE, calling the hotline, calling directly to get an appointment to be seen. We're doing virtual treatment. And so it's even easier to schedule an appointment because we have, a little bit more flexibility and availability. So I think, I hope that can be an invitation for anyone who might have some trepidation and seeking help or support professionally. It may be easier at this time to do that, to give a call, to look on Psychology Today or other resources, and connect with someone and see if they feel like a good fit for you and schedule something.
Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing that. And also thank you for sharing, obviously, about Healing Space. I just want to just reiterate and reinforce that the team at Healing Space, although we physically closed our offices on March 16th, by March 17th, we were up and running with remote counseling, using a HIPAA compliant platform to be able to do that. And, I can share that, the clinicians and clients are both, finding it to be, supportive and helpful. So we are absolutely here for the community and anyone who is experiencing sexual violence or has any concerns around that can call 201-487-2227 to access care specifically for that. But Amy obviously shared a lot of some ideas and ways that you can access for you and your children some mental health support also during this time. It's clearly key and important. So look, I know we talked about that there's no end date, right? But we all are dreaming of it. But I know I am watching and listening to the news and, as an adult and forget, the children for a moment, um, even though we know soon, whatever soon is, there's going to be, some restrictions lifted and we can get out more, there's no vaccine yet. There's, still a lot more, it's still a lot of unknowns, potential of getting sick, some practices that we've had to jump into, like, washing all of our groceries and wearing masks, out in public, we'll have to prevent, what are some ways and strategies that we can, start to wrap our heads around the road back and also then, preparing our children for that as well. Because I think, I know when I think about my kids, the two things, that kind of pop into my head a lot are one, I think they're going to have a lot of separation anxiety. My kids actually have, you know, um, they're used to being around us. Like I feel like when I dropped them off at nursery school when they were like, 3, that moment where they were crying and screaming and you were like trying to like itch out the door, and leave them there. That I'm wondering if we're going to return to that again when they, have to go back to school, even though they're 7 now and they had no issues. And that's the one thing. And then the other thing is just it's been a lot to kind of keep reminding them the hand washing and all of the practices as we're, in the house alone. But once they get back out there, there's even more fears of what they can come in contact with and trying to really reinforce that for them. So, so it's a lot for us to process getting back out there, but I think also to prepare them. So, what are some thoughts that you can share with us to start to wrap our head around that journey?
I I think we're all going through this together. I mean, I think that, providing them with information as we sort of get it and as we're starting to digest it and figure out how, you know, there's not going to be a magic way of doing this stuff. And I think it's going to, as things start to reopen and as life kind of turns into this new normal, we're going to be figuring this out together. So I think really, really talking about that process with your children is important, right? That we may do something one day and then realize, what, that's not going to work. We're going to try it this way. And that, it's going to feel different and that things are going to be changing and adapting. But I think the positive thing is that children, more so than adults, as we probably all can realize, are so resilient. And I think, I know at least for myself that makes me feel grounded. That I know that kids are more resilient than adults than I am. So I know that I can sort of get the support that I need and figure that out for myself how to make that happen. But I know that they're resilient and that they can adapt. I remember the first couple of weeks of my kids being at home and sort of how I was talking to them about what was happening. And they've adapted pretty well. We're in a new structure and a new routine. And for me, it's harder. But I think for them, sometimes you just have to sort of fake that confidence to ensure that emotional safety for your children. And so I think as things continue to change and grow, roll out, we're going to do that together.
Well, that's great advice. And I really do want to encourage parents again, don't don't feel like you can't reach out for help and support right now. We have a lot of amazing practitioners in our community. There's a lot of agencies. And, it probably is just a few, clicks on your keyboard to connect you to someone that can really be a help and a resource. So I do encourage you to get that help if, you're feeling like you need it. So as we wrap up, Amy, any last tips that you'd have for parents out there at this time? You gave us so much great information. Thank you. So much to process.
Yeah, I think just remember to breathe, remember to do some things that you enjoy, remember to take breaks and set limits for yourself. And I know for me, it helps um, to really think about what I'm grateful for. It's very, very easy for me to lose my patience and to lose sight of this and lose sight of sort of the end. Um, but I think, just thinking about what I am grateful for in this time and that we're all in this together.
Mm. Very well put. And Facebook friends, we thank you for spending this time with us. If there is someone in your life that you think would really benefit from hearing this conversation, you don't have to worry that they missed it. This will live on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel, and you can share the link or they can come here themselves and watch it at any time. If you're like me, I end up watching a lot of these things later at night after the kids go to sleep and have a little bit of quiet. And, I'm grateful that there's so many opportunities during the day for conversations like this or meditations or, areas just to give me a little escape or information, that's helpful for me during this time. So we hope that you can continue to join us as we are finishing out the week. Being Thursday, we're almost there. But this afternoon, we're having a very important conversation, and it's a companion conversation to this about children. And this is April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And will be talking with Nydia Monagas, who is of the New Jersey Children's Alliance. She's the executive director there. And talk a little bit about how we can support children during this time. We know with the situation that we have happening right now of sheltering in place, it's very possible that a child is living in the house with their abuser. And unfortunately, because they're not able to go to school and be out in the areas where they can access some support or help, it's very dangerous. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. We'll also be joined by Julie Miner, who is with the Center for Hope and Safety. And she and that organization focuses on supporting domestic violence survivors, similarly to what's happening with children in abuse situations. We're also seeing, obviously, an increase of challenges for survivors of domestic violence, again, because they can very well be shut in their homes with their offenders. And we'll also be talking a little bit about sexual violence survivors and some of the challenges that they're experiencing right now. So at 1 o'clock this afternoon, we'll be having that conversation. So we hope you can join us for that as well. And tomorrow, I'm happy to share that we will be joined with Joanne Valley, who's an analyst with Merrill Lynch, and Denise Moss Heitlager, who is the director of marketing with McLaurin Engineering. And we're going to be talking a little bit about corporate America and how the women in those environments are dealing with COVID-19 and the new pressures of working remotely and, the juggling act that's happening, specifically for women working in those kinds of environments. So we thank you for spending some time with us this morning. And Amy, thank you so much. You really shared so many good tips. And if nothing else, really a time for us to stop and listen and, hopefully, reconnect or I should say disconnect from some of the stress and anxiety in our homes and reconnect with some positive strategies, to be able to help us, manage that. So we're so grateful that you were able to spend some time with us and share that. Everyone at home, we wish you well. Please stay healthy, stay strong, and definitely seek supports when you need it. There are folks in the community right now that are ready and willing to help. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.